All right, so here we go. Step 1 then. And I'll also have my PowerPoint here available so we can all follow. So basically what we're going to be doing now is focusing on this area of the shopping cart where we're looking at a few things. So basically what we're going to be doing is here again, the contract catalog will be used as the preferred option. So in this case, if the shopping carts, of course, are raised as they're always raised, but in the case that we're looking at now, we're going to be selecting the product IDs from a contract catalog, which already in itself has the supplier information as well as the Incoterms. And again, the Incoterm and location fields must be populated. So the things that we're going to be doing in the training environment will maybe not necessarily be exactly the same in production. So things that we're going to be doing here manually as adding the Incoterm and location fields that I'm marking right here in production will not necessarily have to be manually updated. They will just be taken directly from the information in the contract catalog. Okay, in this case, the Incoterm will be selected from a matchbox and locations will be selected from a drop-down list. Okay, now what is new is that for goods, what we're doing now, raising a shopping cart for vehicles specifically, no freight line will be used any longer for the shopping cart for goods. The freight shopping cart will be created separately. So basically, this is some of the key features that we now have to pay attention to. There will no longer be a need to add a freight line in our shopping cart for goods. The PO delivery address and performance location becomes the destination location in the freight unit in TM. And now what does that mean? Is that we're going to be, in this case, and this is something that we were also discussing if I'm not mistaken, in the WebEx before, the delivery address that we're talking about adding it is supposed to be added by the requisitioner, as far as we're aware, is now going to become the destination location in TM. So how is that important? So basically, based on the information that we're going to be later adding in TM, is already directly influenced by what we're going to be adding as the delivery address in our shopping cart. Okay, the purchasing group now also becomes a critical piece of data here. We're going to be selecting a purchasing group that will be defaulted with the planner group in TM. And this planner group in TM will have the visibility on the DTR that is going to be created for phase 1. And so far now only for phase 1, the purchasing group S05 PD vehicles team is the one that will be integrated with TM. So what's important about selecting the correct purchasing group is that then the TM planner in TM is the one who will have then visibility of this DTR, which is eventually synonym of what we know as the inbound delivery number that is generated after the PO has been approved. So we'll have our PO number that will eventually generate an inbound delivery number that is in itself generating a DTR number in TM. So these are going to be all linked together. And the purchasing group that we select in the shopping cart is the one that's going to have visibility of that. So it's very important that when we select our purchasing group, we make sure we select the correct one. And for phase 1, it is the one that is here visible. Okay, then selecting the supplier in this case will allow the supplier to submit the related transportation events in the carrier collaboration portal. Now what's important here, the minute that we select our contract, let's say we select our product ID from our contract, we should have our supplier information there. It's all linked together with the Incoterm, the product ID, and the supplier itself. So what this means actually is that when we're selecting a product ID from a contract that we have established, the supplier information should already be there. It's not like you have to go into the shopping cart and select it from there. Okay, we'll be doing that now step by step so it's a bit clearer. And then again, the delivery date serves as a baseline date for the new Umoja transportation model to estimate all other related dates: departure, handover, arrival destination, etc. So now, here is where we were having this discussion in the WebEx before, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. As far as we were aware, the delivery date here is intended to be added while we're creating the shopping cart by the requisitioner, but we were told by the other members that the delivery date should not be added by the requisitioner. but it should be added in the PO. If I'm not sure if you guys are hearing me, if you can intervene. And so far, that's what we were discussing in our WebEx session before. And I believe if Leandro is there as well, he can confirm it. But I'm just really putting that out there. So if you guys can intervene and tell me if I'm wrong or right. We were telling everyone that the delivery dates were added in the shopping cart by the requisitioner, and then we're told that no, they were supposed to be only added in the PO. Because the contract itself, when we're selecting a product ID, would only have the let's say the leave date, not the delivery date. So there would be no way for a requisitioner to know what the delivery date would be. Okay, so if you guys intervene at any time, let me know. If not, I'm just going to move on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me? Now, the delivery dates are populated into the shopping carts, but at the purchase order level, they are harmonized by the buyers. Because in a shopping cart, you may have a 2-week delivery items, or you may have an 8-month delivery items, all on the same plate. But when we are ordering them, we have to harmonize their deliveries if we want joint shipment. So in that regard, the delivery dates in the shopping cart are not binding and usually meaningless for the acquisition project. The buyer should determine what should be the overall delivery date for the complete PO if the partial shipment is not the intention. That's it.
I see. Thank you. Thank you. That's very, very clear.
No problem. Now, I sent a chat question. Are you reading your chat?
Yes, yes. I was just, as I was reading through the PowerPoint, I wasn't. I just take the time, some dead time in between to look at it. So I'm seeing the question, what about the storage locations, right?
All right. Now, look, before the direct material role, the procurement division does not have direct material role. But spare parts requisitioning has to proceed with direct material role, which makes choosing storage location compulsory at the shopping cart levels. If there are mistakes in the storage locations, PD does not have the ability to rectify it because buyers do not have direct material roles.
Okay, so in this case, I see when you mentioned the storage location, it's not added to this slide exactly because this was not something that is new since we were already talking about this for the Galileo decommissioning project each time we were raising a shopping cart for materials. So of course we're still going to be adding the storage location, the mission, and so on. But for this specific case, since we were really just linking SRM to TM, we didn't add that information into this slide. But yes, what you're saying was definitely something we were covering when we were talking about the integration of SRM with the Galileo decommissioning project with GDP.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So we're going to be adding that as well now when we go back into the system. But we were just covering now the basic fields that were very important and linked to TM as well. But thank you very much. And anytime you feel like you need to intervene, please do so. Okay, so we're back to our shopping cart. So again, what we're going to be doing automatically here is set our values. All right, just remember, I just see your name CEM, but just remember to mute yourself when you're done.
Thank you. So, okay, I'm muting. Yes, sure.
And your name is, sorry? Sorry, I just waited to ask you that when you muted yourself.
Yeah, my name is Cem. It is written C-E-M.
Okay, so it's Cem. All right, thank you.
Yes. I'm muting myself again, all right?
Thank you, yes. Okay, so we're basically now going to add the details of the information that we were supposed to add in our default settings. So we're basically going to add now the purchasing group and information like the location plant that we were just talking about before, as well as the purchasing group. So the first thing we'll do here is add what we were talking about in the item basic data, the purchase group, and ensure we select the one that we were talking about in the PowerPoint presentation, which was the PD vehicles team. And see, we have quite a number of them here, but the one we were supposed to use is the PD vehicles team here. Then we're also going to be adding the information related to the location and plant. Okay, so it's quite slow there. And for this specific case, we're going to be adding the one for unmiss. Okay, guys, just give me one quick second. Okay, I just need all the details so I don't have to go back and forth. All right, so, and then as we were talking about the storage location, we're going to select the one that is 3104. Okay, so basically what we're doing first of all is just setting our default values so that any of the items that we add into our shopping cart are all defaulted to this data. I'm sure you're all aware of this and have done this before, but basically I'm just repeating so that we know exactly what's going on here. So in the case of setting our default settings, all the items will be linked to this basic item data, so I don't have to go individually and adding this information later on. So that's why I'm doing this right from the beginning. Okay, so I'm just making sure now. I'm going to review my plant that I chose the right one. Okay, SS10. And we can move on to our account assignment details. Okay, and the same thing goes for this. Now we're going to add the same account assignment details for the rest of the items in our shopping cart. So we'll make sure that this is just for the sake of the exercise working. Okay, and we're going to add our fund as well for unmiss. For people like David and Juanita who were in the training in New York, these were the details we were adding as well to the shopping cart in our training environment. So we could see that everything was working fine. And then the last thing we'll do is the account assignment. We're going to switch that from cost center to asset, as we're going to be adding assets to our shopping cart. Okay, so basically we have, okay, this has deleted all the previous information. So let me just quickly type it again. All right. And that completes our account assignment details. And we'll now go to the delivery address information, as we were talking about in the PowerPoint presentation slide we were seeing before. So this information is going to also connect to TM and let the TM planner or the system know what is the final destination, right? So where all these items that we're now procuring in this shopping cart are eventually going to be sent to this final destination. So we have to eventually add this delivery address now in the shopping cart. So what we're going to be doing is making sure that, as we see here, this is Unifill HQ. So eventually we're going to have to change that information. And basically by selecting the delivery address that will eventually be available to you, you cannot manually enter it. You will have to proceed to changing the information by clicking on the matchbox and making sure you select the delivery address that is there. And that will be critical when we go into TM. Okay, so we're writing unmiss here. And there should be only one result that we'll select, and we can move on from there. Hopefully it doesn't time out. All right, so we only have one option. We'll select that delivery address that, of course, the system is giving me based on the master data. And now I have already populated all the fields that were critical to me. So the first thing was the item basic data. We made sure that we're selecting the PD vehicles team, which is the purchasing group, as we were saying at the beginning of the session. This is one of those critical key fields that needs to be selected. And why is that? Because now that TM and SRM are linked together, selecting the correct purchasing group will allow the TM planner to eventually view the DTR number that is going to be generated once we're done approving our shopping cart, approving our PO, and this generates an inbound delivery document, which in itself generates its own document in TM. Okay, so that's why this field was critical. We also added the location, plant, and the mission, and the storage location. Even though we're not talking about now adding or buying buying materials for inventory, but we still have to add this information. The account assignment, we're just adding this information for the sake of the exercise, and so that all the items in our shopping cart have the same information. And then finally, the delivery address that we're adding as a default for unmiss, so we know what is the final location for our transportation. So we'll click on
sorry, can
yes.
I have a question? Can I have a question?
Absolutely.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Now, we are defaulting the storage location as you have just done it.
Yes.
Thank you for that. But as you know, most major peacekeeping missions have several sub-duty stations. For example, yes. Somalia has 7, for example. And now, is there a virtual storage location that can represent all sub-duty stations so that this defaulting mechanism would be applicable to all those sub-duty stations? The reason that I'm telling you is that when the actual goods are received by the RNI unit, the physical receipt, then this they will be disseminated to the all sub-duty stations, or to some of them. So in that regard, the defaulting data that you are using is the address ID of one of the sub-duty stations, probably.
Yes, absolutely.
Is my interpretation correct? Usually the one that is the biggest, largest, or in the capital city, but actually itself is an actual physical location. That's why it cannot represent all the sub-duty stations in that manner.
Exactly.
Is my interpretation correct? Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Now, in the case that you're mentioning, as far as I'm aware of, there is no virtual location for all sub-locations that we can add to a shopping cart, because eventually when we're creating it, we already know at least have an idea of where it's going. So we could probably add one of the main storage locations here when it's sent for inventory. Now, again, remember in this particular case, it's just the training environment, so we're just using a generic storage location. But of course, in reality, especially when items are going into inventory, this becomes quite important that we add the correct storage location in the shopping cart itself. But then, of course, this could always be changed later on once in ECC.
Okay. Look, what's happening is this. You are the chief transport officer in a major peacekeeping mission, and you are operating 5, 6, 10 different sub-duty stations. Now, if you cannot represent all those sub-duty stations with a virtual one, then, okay, you have to use a physical storage location, the actual real storage location. So in that regard, if the scope of work for the freight forwarding provided by the CTO wants the freight forwarder to split the delivery into multiple batches and deliver them directly from the commodity vendor to those sub-duty stations, and that virtual location would work. But if the physical location has to be used as the default, then all the goods intended to be disseminated, all those sub-duty stations, may first has to be routed to this main location, and then the splitting of the batch into multiple parties, packages, has to be done by the UN staff, which could have been done by the freight forwarders, actually. Anyway, I'm getting into too much detail here, so please go ahead. I don't want to create a hold-up.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, and Leandro, I saw that you wanted to say something. You can come in, so and definitely appreciate the information. It is not the focus of this part of the training.
Yes, correct. Yes,
still,
yes, you are right.
But still,
yes. For example, we have 10 Kia Sorentos to Unami, okay,
yes.
Iraq. The end user, the CTO, wants 8 of the vehicles to Baghdad, but the 2 of them to Tehran, all right?
Yes.
Now, with this, okay, if you have to use this physical location, physical storage locations by default, so the scope of work would, but the scope of work, actual scope of work by the CTO wants a split delivery. However, the shopping cart will assume at least 2 of the vehicles destined to Tehran will first appear in Baghdad, which is not the reality. They will be shipped directly to Tehran by the request of the CTO. But if there would be a virtual storage location that could represent all sub-duty stations of a peacekeeping mission, then whether 8 of them routed to Tehran, to Baghdad, and the 2 of them to Tehran, they could all be received and inspected safely. And then the inventory, the STO, stock transfer orders, could be issued in the back end for the 2 vehicles to sub-duty station later on.
Okay.
Again, I'm getting into too much detail here, but there is a split happening between the actual scope of work versus the storage locations that has to be defaulted, all right?
Thank you for the detailed explanation. I just want you to make something clear. I mean, and that we understand I think Brian already you mentioned this, okay, in the presentation, but just for everybody to have it clear that in TM, what will derive the final destination will not be the storage location, but more what Brian was showing before, the delivery address, right? The performance location and delivery address, right? So the storage location will be more in terms of where
material.
where
for direct material, you have to choose the storage location. For the assets, it's not the case.
No, we still need to. Okay, so in the case of vehicles, we still need to select the storage location. Okay, so that when we receive them, when the missions will receive them, they will be stocked in that storage location. But for the purpose of this session, that is more for the transportation management. So we want to make it clear that for the transportation management module, what matters in terms of freight forwarders will receive the delivery address specified in the shopping cart as final destination, and there can be one.
And one delivery address only. Yeah.
It can be one or different if you specify for different for each line a different delivery address. Okay.
Okay.
So one thing is the storage location more for inventory purposes, and the other field that is relevant for transportation purposes is the delivery address that will in fact indicate where the freight forwarder has to deliver the vehicles in the mission. Okay.
Okay. So the requisitioner who is raising the shopping cart should have the advanced information at the shopping cart stage that 8 of them will be routed to this sub-duty station, 2 of them will be routed to this storage location, so she should choose the respective storage locations at the shopping cart level, which has never been observed, but that's ideally the situation. That would be very ideal.
If the freight forwarder has to deliver it to the different regions, that's the case. If they have to deliver it only in one central location, and then it's the mission responsibility to send it to the different regions, that's a different scenario. But the main point here is that the delivery address is the one triggering the final destination in TIA.
Okay. Thank you for your explanation. I'm unmuting myself again, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm muting.
Okay, thank you, Leandros. So we can move on now to where we left off. So basically, we just set the default settings, and now what we're going to do is add the items, and we're going to do so from a contract catalog. That's the scenario we're following through. And now we're going to see a couple of other things that we were discussing when we were looking at the slide for our PowerPoint. So basically, we're all familiar with this screen, and now we would have to add our contract catalog number, which we're just going to add here under the contract ID, and we'll apply the search, which should just give us the items that we're going to be working with. And now we can look at the screen and understand a bit more what we were talking about with some of the information in the initial slide. So basically, we see here that the supplier is in this column. Nissan shows us the supplier for each of these items. So that's the supplier information that we were discussing at the beginning on the slide in the PowerPoint, and the short description of the item that we're going to be transporting. In this case, we're going to be working with the 3 of them. The product IDs, which of course in this case is not as important, and could be more important for when we were talking about GDP and product IDs and so on. But what does concern us is right here, the Incoterm key, and that may be not the best marker there, but we see that we have our Incoterms, DAP, XWorks, and FCA. So each one of these items already have the supplier assigned in the contract catalog, as well as the Incoterm, which will be the one deciding which is the either the final destination location or the handover location, depending on the Incoterm that is here in the contract catalog, as well as the Incoterm location that shows right to the right. So we see that for the Incoterm DAP, delivery at place, it'll be directly taken to the final destination, which is the actual mission. For XWorks, we're picking up where the UN is becoming responsible and picking up from the Yokohama port, which is probably already where the supplier is located. And now I know that we have this discussion in the other WebEx session too. It may not be Yokohama port exactly, but it may be the warehouse for Nissan, but still this is the training environment. So basically what I'm just trying to tell you is the direct relation between the Incoterm and the destination location or the handover location that we're going to be adding later on in the shopping cart. And then last but not least, the FCA Incoterm and the handover location, which would be Durban port. So basically this is what we were discussing at the beginning with our slide, with our PowerPoint, the supplier information already given, and the Incoterm and location, destination location linked to it. So we're going to select all three of these items, and we're going to add them to the cart and proceed to the checkout. Okay, so now we have our items in our shopping cart, and we're going to go one by one, just making sure that we complete the key information that we were discussing at the beginning and that was reflected in our PowerPoint. So we select our first line, click on the details, and I see the time has kind of flown by, but if there's no need for you guys to leave the session, I will remain here and we can go through the process completely. And if by any chance you get... Yes.
Hey, Brian, just as you mentioned, in the interest of time, I think, you know, basically what we want to see is, if possible, instead of going through the entire process from end to end, I know that TM is supposed to go live next week.
Yes.
I believe on the 21st. So I think a lot of people who are new to this maybe need a little just general background and maybe to know what specific tasks we're going to be responsible for once the 21st comes around, what we're going to be asked to do in the system in terms of what the vehicles team responsibility is when a new PO or new shopping cart for vehicles comes in and a new PO is placed for those vehicles, in terms of specifically what we need to do in TM.
Okay, David, thank you. So basically, specifically for a UNOE and TM, if we could go through this directly, or we could, since we already covered the main parts here, we can just probably go into TM, take a look at a freight order and see what we're supposed to do. But in the case of you guys, and as we saw in New York as well, you'd basically have to just depending on the Incoterm, nothing at all. So we can go back to the PowerPoint. Maybe that's a bit simple if we can just view this.
So for vehicles, Brian, we're going to have two possible Incoterms for almost every order. It's going to be either DAP or primarily it'll be FCA. There are some DAP orders as well.
All right, so here we go. So basically these two scenarios that we're seeing here now on screen. So of course the part that we were looking at now was here for SRM, and now for the TM. If it's DAP scenario, you really wouldn't have to do anything else because the Umoja system automatically processes the DTR that comes out and generates the freight unit, generates the DTR, generates the freight order. So basically everything is done automatically, and it's the goods vendor that takes charge of the transportation. So there's really nothing extra to do. Now, there are cases where the TM planner will have to edit or manage DFOs if the case were to be, where what this means is that, let's say there's a change in the legs, or maybe there has to be a change in all the legs that were generated by the system prior. But of course, these cases, I'm unaware of how often they will occur, where the goods vendor will be asking of course, the TM Planner to go into the system and making any of the changes, but the possibility is there that the TM Planner could go and manage the FOs manually, which would be exactly the same case as if we were talking about the FCA scenario, in the meaning the part where the UN takes care, right, of the equipment. So at the point where the UN would take care of the equipment, the TM Planner would have to also start planning the transportation. So in this case, it's the TM Planner who would have to select the FUs manually, and then Umoja would generate transportation proposals. The TM Planner would have to select the best proposal. So we can take a look at this one as well. So we can go through the shopping cart quick and then see how that generates. We'll just select the FCA one and we'll see, and we'll work with that one instead of going through all the different materials. So we can check this part, which is the one that will require more work from your side. Okay, we don't have to look at the procurement freight. We're just going to focus on this part, and we'll use one of the FCA scenarios. I believe that may cover all the needs so far. So what we'll do is go back to our shopping cart and just, if I'm not mistaken, the only one that was the FCA scenario should be number 3. So we're just going to stick to the 1. Okay, let's see. No, I believe it's frozen. Okay, so we have the details for number 3, and we can add our Incoterm location here, and we'll add the FCA. Oh. So we basically would have to do the same type of data changes for each one of these items. So I'll just use the first one and delete the other 2. So let me go back to the first one and just get rid of some of these lines so we can just go quicker and see how we would proceed with just one of the lines. And hopefully the system is with me in terms of speed. Okay, see, now we deleted one, and we'll delete the other one, and we just have one left. And like that, we can just go directly to what's interesting to us. All right, so we have just that one line now left. Basically, okay, see, now I went too far. All right, so let's take a quick look at this one again. And sorry guys, since I know the time is way too short for 1 hour to go through all these steps, especially for someone who has not seen any of this before. A refresher is fine, but an end-to-end scenario process is quite longer than just 1 hour. So we're just going to repeat quickly what we did before in terms of the catalog, selecting just one item and going through with that one item. Okay. So we're just going to select this one with the FCA, and we'll add it to the cart, and we'll forget about the other 2. Okay, we'll select our details. Just fill in the details quick. Okay, so things are moving a bit faster now. Okay, so again, this section that I'm filling in here, the Incoterm and location, this should not have to be filled manually by the requisitioner. It should be given and defaulted by the selection of the contract catalog. So it's already there, so we shouldn't have to be adding this, especially not manually. And the same thing that I'm doing now for the location itself, we should also be selecting it from a drop-down menu and not just manually keying it in. All right, that's just as a reminder. We can now move on to the account assignment. Okay, and same thing here. We'll just select the details and make sure that we just generate our asset master record for this asset. Okay, and now that it's generated, we should be fine to go and order this shopping cart. Basically, I'm just going through just one of the items so we can just follow all the way through, since the generation of the PO number, the inbound delivery, and what we're supposed to do with that one specifically in the system in TM, so we all know that we're doing exactly the same thing here. Okay, let's just check and see if everything's fine. Okay, and we basically would just order this item. And in the meantime, while this finalizes, I'm going to be logging into TM to save time as well. Okay, so basically we would order this shopping cart, and then as a TM planner, we would go in to TM. I'm going to be working in parallel here with two different screens. And if I see that it's taking too long with the SRM because it's really slow right now, I'm just going to go into TM and we can work with one of the freight orders that has already been generated. So in a sense, again, I'm just logging into the training environment. So in this case, you guys wouldn't have to do this exactly. Just log into production, and that would take you to the TM site. Now, I'm just going to use the credentials for UNOE. And we'll see what TM looks like. So let's say that we have already added the key information to the shopping cart. I think you guys are quite okay with that. That's why David is asking me to move forward. And now we've approved the shopping cart. The PO has been generated. The PO has been approved. That has already generated an inbound delivery document. You guys are not supposed to, let's say, edit the inbound document with the packing information unless you have the inbound coordinator role. So in your case, I believe that's not the case. What you would be doing is directly going into TM, which would look like the following. And what you would be doing is looking for the actual document. Let's say in your case would be the DTR document that was generated. So the first thing you should do, and of course this also depends on the type of Incoterm that this was generated with. So if it's DAP, if you see here, if I'm in planning, there's something called Transportation Cockpit, right? So this would basically be the first place to go to, where we're going to be searching for DTRs that have freight units that have not yet been, there's no transportation proposals created for yet. Okay, and I'm going through this and I'm skipping some other details just to focus on what I believe it is that you need. So basically when I click on the Transportation Cockpit, this is what it looks like. We have a set of lines here, and each one of them represents or is supposed to tell the TM planner what you're looking for. So let's say that the Incoterm that you're looking for is DAP. You have a line here for UNOE DAP. Now the problem is that you shouldn't be able to find any freight units under this one because the system automatically generates the freight orders for DAP Incoterm scenarios. Yes, David?
Sorry, no, I'm okay, never mind.
All right. Okay, so basically that's why I was saying when it's a DAP scenario, you guys shouldn't worry about it as everything is going through unless the TM planner is told to edit the freight orders. But we're going to learn to do that now with the other type of scenario that we have here. So in a sense, we could look for our Incoterm XWorks, which is the one that would really be relevant to us in this case. So let's take a look at this one because it's the one we would have to generate transportation proposals for. And we would select this line, click on continue, and what that will take us is to the next screen, which is going to pretty much load all the freight units that have not been processed, that don't have yet freight orders. And what that means, so that we have an idea, because I know these terms could be quite new and strange. So remember that the DTR number, and we're going to take a look at that one quickly is the one that was generated once the inbound was generated, the inbound delivery document. That DTR number is automatically linked to what we call the freight unit, which is the number we're seeing here to our left, the freight unit number here. And what that means, what the freight unit stands for, is everything that can be shipped at once. So let's say anything that can be shipped from a source location that is going to the same destination location. So a good example are these two freight units here, 9.1 and 9.2. They're leaving from the same place and going to the same place. So these would be perfect candidates to combine freight units and generate freight orders. So that means the transportation would combine these two. And if we're looking at the dates, which is another factor that we have to look at, there is less than 7 days in between. So this would be a perfect candidate for a combination. So what we would be doing is combining these two together and telling the system what we want to do is ship them together, because it's okay to ship these together. They're leaving from the same place, going to the same place, and their dates, the date range between them is 7 days, which is what we're looking for. Now, before we do that, what I want to look at is these documents, these numbers that I'm talking about, but it's always easier to just see this data firsthand. So I just clicked on one of these, which is the freight unit. I just clicked on it, and that'll take us to this screen that has just loaded now. And if you realize at the top of the window, we have the displayed number, and it tells you what you're looking at. You're looking at the freight unit and its number here. Okay, so always pay attention to the header and to see what document you're looking at. I would recommend that automatically we go to the tab called Document Flow. Okay, this tab called Document Flow, and why it's important is because it links all the documents that have something to do with each other in one single window. So let's say we have our freight unit that is linked to the DTR number that I was talking about before. This one was the one generated automatically by the inbound delivery number. So by looking at one of the documents, we have all the other ones. So if I clicked on the DTR number, what that would do is simply load another page that is going to show me details from this document, which is the DTR. And you see the same Document Flow tab is now leading the list. We have our DTR, our inbound, and our freight unit at the bottom. If I bring this window down a little bit, we can see that this inbound delivery number and DTR number are the ones that are linked to this freight unit, which ends in 392, which is that one here. Okay, just so you become a little more familiar with what all these numbers are. Now, as you can see, if there were any freight orders already generated for these, you would see them below. Okay, you would have an extra amount of digits and numbers, maybe 1, 2, 3, depending on the amount of legs. Okay, so freight orders, think of freight orders as like stopovers when you're booking a flight on one of these websites that tells you you're going to have 2 stopovers at different cities. So each freight order is going to represent one of those stopovers or layovers. Okay, so you can have 2 or 3 depending on how many you've chosen from the transportation proposal. Okay, and please, I know I'm going a bit fast, but if I am going too fast, stop me as well. Hopefully you're still all following me. So let's say that now from that shopping cart that I generated before, these are the documents that are now in TM. And what I'm supposed to do as a TM planner is now generate transportation proposals. Okay, so basically the way TM works is that every time you click on a hyperlink, right, like this one, it'll open a new window. So you could always just backtrack and close, right, so you don't get lost in all these windows that have opened up. It takes us back to the screen that we're looking at before. Remember, this is what we call the transportation cockpit. Okay, it's right here at the top on the left. Now, these screens may look quite small, but you could always play around by maximizing this screen and seeing the full picture. So let's say you've forgotten your freight unit, or you don't know what your freight unit number is. You also have the DTR document here to the right. You could always just type it in this search box and find any of the DTRs or freight units that you're looking for. So basically, this is the screen that I'm interested in. I select the freight unit that I want to generate a transportation proposal for. Okay, and then I click on Transportation Proposals. And I'll cross my fingers because this one was crashing on us in the WebEx before, but now should be okay. Okay, great. All right, so I can just, I'm just going to do that again. It took us 2 tries last time. Hopefully it's going to just take me 2 tries now as well. So I'm doing the same thing. Again, this could be used as a refresher. Transportation Cockpit. When I log into TM as a TM planner, I select UNOE XWorks because it's the only one that's going to allow me to plan transportation for a freight unit. And here's my freight unit again. I'll just select that line. So now I'm going a bit faster. And we click on Transportation Proposals, and hopefully this time the system doesn't crash. Took me 3 times in yesterday's WebEx session. Hopefully today, good. Oh, with 2 it was enough. Perfect. All right, so this is what it looks like when the system is giving you the transportation proposals back. So if we remember from the poster that we were looking at, right? Remember, we're still on this plane here. We went through this part of procurement quite quick, but the system generated our DTR and our freight unit anyway. I told you guys that for the goods vendor stage, which means the DAP scenario, the system was doing it all by itself. So we're focusing on this column here. This is where we are now, is we selected our freight unit. We did this. Umoja generated TM proposals, and now what we have to do is select the best proposal. So this is where we are now. Okay, I'm going back to the transportation proposal, and this is what it looks like in the system. We have a number of transportation proposals. Just to see them all, you guys could just collapse them and see that we have a total of 9. Or let me just click here, or simply scroll up and down with the scroll bar to your right. So what this is showing us now is the system has proposed a number of transportation proposals. In this case, as we can see, the majority of them, if not all of them, the option is by C. Okay, so you can just see by the green color here that the first transportation proposal, the main means of transportation, is going to be by C. Same thing for the second, third, fourth, and so on. It also tells you here, as you can see, for the freight unit, that's the one we're looking at. I'm just collapsing that arrow. This is the freight unit we're working with. It'll always tell you that transportation proposal 2, freight unit, because remember, we can combine freight units. So maybe for one proposal you have more than one freight unit line here. So let's click on that and open that up a bit. So in this case we have 3 stages. So that means if we were booking a flight on a website, we would have 3 stopovers. Okay, wouldn't be the most recommended, but in this case this is probably the best transportation proposal. So let's see. The first one from our source location will be by truck. This is how we have to interpret this, and the destination will be Carlson Port. Then the main leg would be Carlson Port to Nakora Port, and finally from Nakora to our final destination. And remember, this final destination was already added back in our shopping cart. Okay, you could always filter and sort by distance, by duration, by cost. So this is why this becomes interesting. Now I know some of you may wonder, because it happened in New York and it's happened in our prior WebEx sessions, is TM planners, or those who are going to have the TM planner role, are wondering why do they even have to worry about this and do this, because it's the freight forwarder who's eventually going to forward the actual routes and the actual rates and the actual transportation, let's say, after there's been the freight procurement has been already approved and there's a freight PO. So why waste the time doing this part of the process? Now, again, as was said in New York, and I remember Babacar mentioning this as well, in this case, what we're doing here is we're generating estimations. So in a way, this will be very useful for reports in the future when we're comparing actual data in the real world versus the data that we have in the UN. So basically, after a certain amount of time, we could always compare the actual data with the estimated data and realize how far we are from reality. And also, this would help us save on cost on transportation in the future by having more accurate master data in the transportation proposals. Yeah, so basically that's why this becomes important. So the best thing would be to choose the best transportation proposal based on either cost, duration, or distance, whatever is more important for us at the time. In this case, cost. We could just select this one here as we see, and we accept the planning. Once we accept the planning, it'll take us back to our previous screen where we have our freight orders here. Now, before we save at the top here on the left, it doesn't matter that the system is showing us these freight orders. They will disappear if I don't save what I just generated. Now it's just showing us how many freight orders the system has generated. So imagine I had combined 3 or 4 of these freight units that are leaving from the same place going to the same place within 7 days, and maybe I would only have 2 freight orders, or 6 depending. So basically, this is just telling you what you're about to say OK to. If we click on Save, eventually what we're doing is we're generating these freight orders and telling the system that this is what the transportation proposal we want to follow. And we can simply click on one of them. I'm going to click on this one here because it's the one that is starting our transportation. And while I click on this, let me take a look at that chat that I haven't seen in a while. And again, sorry guys, if I am going too fast, please let me know. No one has said anything yet, so I think we're okay. And
Brian, sorry, can I ask you just a general question, just again in the interest of time? Is there anything we, the buyer of the vehicle, needs to do different when we're keying in the purchase orders in SRM? And do we need to take any action in TM?
Yes, still there is no action to be taken by a commodity buyer.
That is my question. Is there any action? I know you're giving an overview of the system, which is great because nobody's seen it. But just in terms of what our expectations are come go live, do we need to do anything different in the PO, or do we have any action in TM as from the buying of the actual commodity?
Honestly, nothing different from what you're doing now. No, you simply would the same process for a buyer. If there's anything you need to edit in the shopping cart, it's something that you are doing today, but it is the requisitioner the one who would have to eventually do what we were showing in the production, in the training environment, sorry. But basically not even that, because all these things that I was showing you guys in the system are supposed to be defaulted already. You're not going to be manually entering them. So as a buyer, you really wouldn't be doing anything different. Okay, unless you have the TM planner role. That's it, David. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, sorry, Brian.
Yes.
This is Jem again. Now, as you have mentioned, for the DAP Incoterms, the planners, the freight forwarders, up to the implementation of the TM, I mean, they didn't have to do anything because all the freight forwarding arrangements are supposed to be taken care by the commodity vendor, and it will still be going to be taken care by the commodity vendor. But when I'm looking at your execute and monitor column in your current slide, now the goods vendor, the commodity vendor, is supposed to update events, upload attachments. This seems to be the most critical part for the vehicles team. The reason is this: if it is an FCA PO, then the system will push the logistics team in DFS to make the freight forwarding arrangements, to choose a freight forwarder, competitive bidding, obtain the scope of work, etc., etc. But when it is DAP purchase orders, then there is no action to be taken by the logistics unit. Then PD vehicles team has to inform the goods vendor, the commodity vendor, hey, will you please upload this document to this link when the vehicles are ready? when you obtain the bill of lading, when you obtain the forwarder's cargo receipt, please do this, do that. Now, what kind of changes does the system introduce?
Okay, and
for the commodity buyer?
Okay, so if we're talking about in both cases, right, DAP and XWorks as we're looking at here on the screen, there is two systems that the events can be submitted through. One is the CCP system that we can take a look at, and the other one would be done in TM. So again, the TM planner would be doing it in TM, and then the goods vendor or the freight forwarder should be doing it in CCP, or at least that's the expectation. I know that in New York as well, we had a discussion in class, and it didn't seem to be it didn't seem to look that good for goods vendors and freight forwarders to be updating these files. Yeah. Yes, and so there's supposed to be communication between these two systems, right? Let's say that the TM planner can write in TM a note that eventually will be visible by the goods vendor or the freight forwarder, asking for a specific document to be uploaded to the system. Now, here's another way. Let's say the vendor or the freight forwarder do not want to be submitting events in CCP and using our system. They could always still use the same procedure they use now, and the TM planner would simply have to go into TM, upload these documents into TM, and submit the events in TM as well. So everything could still occur the same way. So basically, depending on if the vendor or freight forwarder are doing, let's say, the work that is expected from them here, at least in this PowerPoint, not in reality, the TM planner would have to do that work, let's say, for them.
Okay, because, Brian, the reason, one of the main differences will be, in your, for example, the bid planner, you see the multiple lags until the full transportation project is completed. From port A to port B, from port B to port C, from port C to port D, etc., etc., etc. So you see the destination, the durations, maybe even partial prices, etc. So for an FCA shipment or an XWorks shipment, the TM planner will kind of give an overview. Hey, your goods are at this point on Earth. This leg, this stage is completed, etc. But when it's the DAP delivery, so there is nothing to be done by the logistics units here at the UN. Everything will be taken care of by the goods vendor. And we will just see the vehicles at our doors. At that point, the vendor, the only thing that the goods vendor has to do is to get the proof of delivery document from the receiving location, POD, and submit it to the vendor claims unit to substantiate his payment claim. This is the current procedure. So the proof of delivery and the invoice will not be visible to CCP, to TM, according to this design. Most probably, all right?
Well, let's say it doesn't have to, it won't be visible if the goods vendor does not submit the events and attach the documents in CCP. That is true. That is true. You will not know until it's at your door, like you're saying. But that's why, in this case, there is communication. And again, you guys are more experts in this than I am, since you do this every day. But according to the system, if you guys are in communication with the goods vendor at any time throughout the stage of the transportation, which I'm sure you are, the documents that are supposed to be critical for you are received one way or another, correct? You don't just get all the documents right at the end, but every time there's an event, a critical event that you have to have a document for, let's say proof of delivery or loading begin or loading end, eventually the vendor is communicating with you and sending you these documents.
But Brian, sorry, thank you. We are on the same track with you, but think about the vendor's point of view. His main motivation is to get paid, right?
Yes.
Because he's delivering some goods and services to the UN. So when he delivers the vehicles to Brindisi, and the Brindisi gatekeepers gives him, dear Mr. Smith, here is the proof of delivery for your vehicles, and he uses this to substantiate his payment claim. This is his motivation. It's fine, it's understandable, and in fact this closes the procurement loop. Our case files are mostly closed after that point. But here, what I mean is this. For X-Works and FCA shipments, the system will kind of produce some signals to the logistics officer about the whereabouts of the item. Say your item is progressing 10 kilometers per hour, beep, 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 beep. It will give you GPS signals probably along the way. But when it comes to DAP deliveries, nobody will know the whereabouts of your goods. They will appear in your door all of a sudden. So in that regard, yes, the DAP deliveries, the system cannot feed the logistics expectations the same manner as the FCA or X-Works. You will not know where are your vehicles if it is a DAP delivery term. It can be somewhere in an ocean. Yes, I will see them. So in that regard, it would be the ideal thing that my DAP delivery goods vendor would give me daily, weekly signals, EDI signals about the whereabouts of the goods. So it would give you a hint about the locations of your vehicles. But if the buyers are gonna kind of feed the system in that manner, that will introduce additional workload to the PV vehicles team.
I see what you mean. So basically, and again, this is only phase one. Like what you're talking about eventually in phase two, there's some talks about some combination with EDI where the system will automatically provide updates. Now, again, I'm not going to talk about that because I don't know much about it yet. Phase 2 has not been implemented yet, but I know things will change in terms of this knowing where your shipments are, in one system talking to the other. But I know what you're talking about in terms of more work. So if you are a TM planner and you're supposed to update and upload attachments in a DAP scenario, if you don't know where anything is at the moment because the good vendor is not posting these updates and submitting these events until it's right at your door. It's true that really I don't know how you guys do it now to find out where your shipments are, but eventually the same way you do it now. Exactly.
We send him emails. Yes.
You should still follow the same, but again, submit these events in the system is what's expected from someone who would have the TM planner role, not necessarily a buyer in this case. So you would have to have this role and have to do this update of events. Okay, that's why I wasn't sure how far and how deep to go into each one of these sections in just a refresher session. So I started with the shopping cart, which I knew was definitely something that would be important, and also with the freight orders. But in terms of submitting events, I know this was also something that caused quite a ruckus back in the training in New York. So I get your point, and I understand. Eventually, the same process you're doing now would be the same thing that's going on for a DAP scenario, and whoever has the TM planner role, if the vendor is not submitting events, would be expected to be doing so in TM. That's as much as I can say.
Okay. All right.
All right, Tim?
I'm muting myself again.
All right. And, okay, so it's 6 o'clock. So I'm going to continue where I left off. Again, taking a look at the freight orders and also looking at what the submission of events is going to look like. Okay, we can skip the whole part of procurement freight unless somebody wants to see how we would assign the carriers to POs and FOs. If not, but again, I'm not sure that's something that is important for you. So I'm going to go back to the system where we left off and take a look at the freight order we were looking at. So the last thing I did before we started our conversation was just click on a freight order number, which was the following. This one, again, will have a set of tabs that are quite important here as we're looking at here. Remember, one of the most important ones was document flow, which is going to show us the flow of documents and that the documents that are linked to that freight order. And now, since we're talking about event submissions, let's say you are the TM planner. Let's say you're receiving emails and you're being told to submit these events. This is eventually something that has to be done. And you're, as the TM planner, you're supposed to do that. How is that done? So eventually, to submit events, where we would have to go is basically through these three different tabs: execution, notes, and attachments. Okay, execution is going to show us the events of this freight order. So you see, when I click on execution, what we're seeing here is the list of events that are supposed to be linked to this specific leg or freight order. So if you receive an email with an attachment that says, listen, hand over a document at the planned date and time, at the planned location is okay, then all you would have to do as a TM planner is just simply report this event as expected. All the events that you guys see here are those that are supposed to be expected to be submitted. Those that are unexpected, let's say there's a delay, there's a damage, those should also, or at least they are expected to be submitted by a TM planner by inserting unexpected events. Okay, so basically this is what it would look like in terms of the one of the legs, in this case the first leg, if a TM planner would have to submit events for a goods vendor, let's say, since we were discussing the goods vendor, let's stick to that one. If you receive that email like Jem was telling us now, and it tells you handover document is fine, here's the attachment. Well, as a TM planner, you'd have to look for your freight order, go to execution, submit the event, and then again you can go to attachments and you attach the document and also add a note here of the actual what this document refers to, right? So this is exactly the document for handover document. So you would be adding the attachment under this tab, always under the freight order, and adding a note, this is the handover document. If, let's say by any chance, there are goods vendors that are submitting these events through CCP as we're expecting, this notes tab is the one that will work as your email works nowadays. So basically, the notes that you add here under this tab are sort of like conversations you can have with the goods vendor or the freight forwarder who's submitting, let's say, 50% of the events in CCP, and you're submitting the other 50%. The conversation within the two of you could occur under this tab notes. Again, I'm just showing you where to go in the system and what would be expected of a TM planner who's supposed to be submitting events. Okay, I know that some of you may think, listen, if I'm already doing it with an email, why do I have to also add the notes to this system? I'm just showing you the three tabs that are key here and also where we would go to submit events if we were a TM planner that is submitting events. So in this case, I can't submit any events yet because I haven't assigned a freight forwarder to this freight order and I haven't changed the status of it either. Okay, so that's why everything seems to be grayed out, and I don't think that even if I try to edit and start adding and submitting documents, I doubt that the system will allow me to. I could still try. This is a training environment, so everything's possible. But before I even go there, since I know that you guys are quite busy back there, we're already over the time, but it doesn't matter as long as you guys are following and are understanding what I'm saying. So maybe now is a good time for a question, if anyone has one. Am I covering something that is interesting to you at this point in terms of event submission?
I think, yeah, thanks, Brian. I think this is all interesting, especially for those who haven't seen it, but I think just in the interest of time, we probably have to wrap it up fairly soon.
Okay, fine. So, David, would it be even interesting to see the link, this part of the poster? Sorry, maybe it's easier if I just show it. This part here where we would assign a carrier to the PO. I know we did this in New York, but I know it's not something that would be directly related to your team or the people in this WebEx. So if you want me to, yeah. So eventually, yes, we'll have to assign the actual carrier, right, with the actual routes and dates and charges. So the TM planner is expected to be updating these things in TM as well once we know what the true rates and dates and charges are. But that's not something that you may be interested in.
Yeah, let's continue, Brian, if you could, just with maybe talking us through the final stages here.
All right, perfect. Thank you, David. Okay, so hold on one second, because I thought I muted you here. Yes, that's Jem. Did you want to add something there? I'm just going to close it up now. With
please go ahead, Brian. Yeah, I'm listening.
All right, fine. So basically, execution, notes, and attachments is what we were looking through. Now, I'm just going to close this freight order so we can take or actually go to the document flow so you guys can just understand an overall. We're basically done with what would be expected from a TM planner so far. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to give you guys the big picture just to close this up. The freight unit now, I selected the freight unit that we created the transportation proposals for. We see the 3 freight orders that are linked to it. If we wanted to see the stages, let's say if we click on stages here, what we would see is each stage for each freight order, for each leg. So at this point, what we have is the source location, destination location, and the stages for each one of these. And now that still have not been assigned a carrier. So if I'm scrolling to the right, I want you guys to see the carrier is still dummy carrier, which means that nothing has been assigned. Now these can be, again, we're going to look at the SOW just to close up as the final thing in this WebEx. But just so you understand, since we generated our freight orders, we have an SOW document. This is the SOW document that then will be used to generate the freight PO. And then once we have the actual rates, charges, and who's going to be transporting what and where, if it's the same freight forwarder for the 3 legs, the carrier will be then updated here in this column. We would have either the same carrier for all 3 or one for each. But still, that is not written in stone. The TM planner could still come back in, let's say if something happens halfway through, and could edit the carrier one by one individually. So they can all be linked to the same one, or the TM planner could add a carrier one by one once it's been approved. Okay, so basically, so you would understand how these stages work. And just to finalize where we would find our SOW. So to find the SOW form, we have to access the freight order. We click on our freight order. Now I know this is quite a lot of information for just maybe an hour and a bit of time, but it's what we have for a refresher. So now we're back on the freight order. We click on the Output Management tab, select our line, and we will get in Document Preview, our SOW document will generate, where all the information that we're going to be then using for the freight PO is necessary. So again, remember that all the information in this SOW, which is the one that we see here on screen, is just estimations so far. And the only thing that will be accurate is the items that we added in the shopping cart in terms of the transportation, the rates, and the locations and so on are just estimates. Of course, these could change once you get the final confirmation from the freight PO. So basically, this is the last part of the WebEx session, was really just to show you the SOW and where to find it. And that would be it, unless you guys have any other thing to add. Again, I know for someone like David or Juanita who were in the training in New York, this is what we call a refresher. For those of you who have seen this for the first time, It may be a lot. Hopefully it's been just enough. So if there's nothing else you guys want to add or you want me to go through something else, this would be what I would close the WebEx session with. And David, Jim, if there's still anyone there. Oh, sorry. Okay, David, sorry. I think you're muted because I muted you manually before. You're unmuted
thanks, Brian.
now.
Yeah, thanks. No, nothing to add from my perspective, but thanks for the overview. I think this was helpful to everybody. And we note what you said about any actions that need to be taken for the shopping carts will still be done by the requisitioner. And then, you know, basically our role in TM and when changes to our PO is limited. But because TM is coming, it's good that everybody's aware of it and what's going to be happening.
Okay, very good. Thank you, David.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Appreciate your time today.
All right, enjoy your day.
I don't know if Jim or anybody else on the team has anything else, any other questions or anything they should jump in now. Okay.
All right. Thank you, David.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
And thank you all for attending. So maybe we'll see each other in the next refresher training. All right, enjoy your day.
Okay, bye-bye, Brian. Thanks.